matter what the market's doing. I'm not selling it. You know what I mean? So no matter what's going on, I'm cash flowing, I'm making money. And my ultimate goal is financial freedom. So right now, most people have to work in order to generate the pay for their lifestyle. For me, I want to be able not to work and be able to live off my cash flow. So that's why as I progress through my journey, I try to acquire more and more property so then my cash flow will eventually offset my work, and then I don't have to work.
So welcome back everyone to Synergy in Multifamily Growth and Mindset Talks. My name is Eric Segura from Blackbridge Capital Partners, and I'm here today with a managing partner of Anon Capital Group, Mr. Tru Tran. He's also a multifamily investor who I had the pleasure of meeting earlier this year. Tru, how is everything today?
It's going okay, Eric.
Great to hear, and a pleasure to have you with me as well. You piqued my interest, just from having conversation with you. We broke bread in New York City when you were here from Florida, and I got excited about what your journey is like, man, and how everything's been progressing with you in the tax liens and tax deeds department. And yeah, curious to learn a little bit more about you. How you began your real estate investment journey.
Okay, so my name is Tru Tran. I'm a first-time immigrant from Vietnam. So I came to the States when I was 5, and I didn't really get interested into real estate until the age of 16 by accident. I got into real estate because I was working at the library, volunteering for the Bright Futures. In the state of Florida, they offer the Bright Futures. It gives you 75% tuition paid for college. So I was getting my volunteer hours, and there was a gentleman there that was retired. He was working there, and he was actually doing tax liens. So I learned the process from him. I asked him some questions, and it seemed very lucrative. So then I informed my mom about it, and pretty much what we walked through the whole process, and that was how I was able to get into real estate. So.
Just from, having those conversations, right? We speak a lot about, networking and just being open to those opportunities, right? And tell me a little bit more about what you learned along with the gentleman that you spoke to me before, how he was able to sort of guide you along.
So, well, with him, I learned that like tax liens and tax deeds, they're different from state to state. So I'm just gonna share with you like how it's different from state to state real quick. As you can see, the states in red, like California, Oregon, Utah, New Mexico, they mainly use a process called tax deeds, in which they actually go after the where you can actually own the property. The green states, kind of like Arizona, Colorado, Montana, they go on a tax lien, which is pretty much a certificate from the government that's issued based on people that owe taxes. States that are in yellow, like Texas and Georgia, it's pretty much they go after the deed for the house for people that don't owe taxes, but then the homeowner can actually redeem their tax back after they pay for it. And then the blue states like Florida, where I'm at, in New York, they do a hybrid of both tax certificates and tax liens.
The reason too why you started in Florida, I guess, really just because it's your backyard, right? Like, did you have any focus on or any interest in any other state besides that?
Well, it was pretty much convenient. Well, at the time, I was in Florida, so it's pretty much easier to do it in Florida. But like the most popular states right now are actually Texas and Georgia. A good summary of the process is a tax lien is pretty much when a homeowner unable to pay for the property tax. So then the government issues a lien for the property based on the amount that they owe. There is an auction being held, and the one who has the highest bid wins the tax certificate. The investor then pays for the full amount that that person owes, and then the homeowner has the option or the ability to pay for it back, obviously with the penalty of what the investor bid on. But that's pretty much the process. Most of the time, when you go for a tax deed or a tax certificate, the homeowner does pay for it back.
Understood. And when I remember when we were speaking here in New York that you have a certain way of looking at the property, studying the properties, and see okay what's the probability of this actually going into a tax deed, right? Can
Correct.
you explain a little bit more about your process there?
My process is the tax collector. Each county has a tax collector. They list all the properties that are actually going to go into a tax certificate or tax deed. It has the parcel number, the address. So the way I screen it, that that I seem to be the most favorable in order to actually get the property is I actually look, has this property continuously been owing taxes? So because it honestly depends on what you're going for. If you're in the state of Florida, you can get up to an 8%, 18% rate of return. If you're only going for the interest that you can accumulate, you can then find a property you like. But if you're actually going to try to actually own the property, you kind of want someone uh, that doesn't have that much. There's certain people that are repeat offenders where every year they're just behind. We don't have enough money to pay for it, and they're willing to pay for the penalty. So the ones I've seen that are all, the properties that have a lot of redemptions, I avoid that because I'm not there for the 80% or the lower amount. I'm actually trying to acquire the property, and then online it tells you the address for the property. So I typically like Google search it. I see how the condition of the property is, if it's well maintained, if it isn't. Properties that are not as well maintained, you have a higher chance of getting the property. The ones that are more maintained, there's a high likelihood that they will pay that certificate off, and then you would have to start the whole process again. So.
Understood. And from your experience, from the time you started investing, which was fairly young, it's, 16, 17, which is great, right? You have quite a bit of time under your wing already in the industry. How many times have you been able to acquire the property, go into the tax lien and then over into the tax deed process?
I acquired my first property. It was actually a one-third acre, two mobile homes. So I stayed in one and I rented out the other. So I was able to cash flow or stock up the money that I get from my second property and just like, accumulate the asset that way. But then since I was such a young age, I was enrolling in college. So I pretty much stopped doing that because I was focusing on school and other things. And then I actually was able to buy other properties from the stockpile money that I got from my first deal using tax liens. So yeah, but then after that, I was able to get I found other ways where I didn't have to wait 2 years. So a lot of times when someone is behind on their taxes, their address is listed online. So I found my friend actually lived next door to someone that was behind on taxes. So I knocked on the door and he was like, "Hey, I'm friends with the person next door. I see that you're actually behind on taxes." And then I said, "I'm willing to pay for it." So before it even goes on auction, I spoke to the person because if it goes on auction, they actually don't get anything. They lose their house. But certain people, as long as they're willing to make some money, they're willing to give you that property. So I was able to pay off the property and acquire that property at a much cheaper amount. So it was a win-win for both people. They were able to get some money from the property, and I was able to get the property at a really affordable price.
Amazing. And how were those conversations like, right? Because I could imagine when somebody's, in the process right now of possibly losing their home, right? And was there a bit of a pushback there, or were they willing to listen to the different options that you presented to them?
I try to present it in a win-win scenario. I was just saying I'm friends with your neighbor, and then they told me that you were struggling with the taxes, and then so I pretty much told them like, hey, I'm willing to pay off your taxes, and
Mhm.
I'll pay all the closing costs, and I'll give you this lump sum of money. You know what I mean? So for them, it was enticing because they didn't have the means to actually pay for the property, and that if they were to sell it, obviously it will show on record that they are behind on their taxes, and they didn't want to go through the hassle of selling it. So for them, it was more of convenience. They were able to get a lump sum money and then just move on because they inherited the property from their parents. So it wasn't like they worked hard and paid the mortgage for it. So for them, it was just like, hey, it's an easy way for me to get money and move on. So it's pretty much I was taking something off their hands that I was willing to, you know, take on. For me, the only thing I do is I present them like this is a way where you can pretty much have some money into it because
Mhm.
because a lot of times most people have a fear of losing something. So
Mhm.
I present it in a positive aspect because I know, for example, people don't like getting emails saying like, hey, or mail from the county saying, hey, they're behind on this, they're going to seize this. So they were in a panic mode, and all I was trying to do is offer them a solution and telling them this is just an option. You can go through this route if you want, but then there's a possibility that you might not have anything. Where with this way, you will guaranteed to have this sum of money, and you don't have to pay anything. I will take over everything. I will pay for the closing costs. I'll get all the paperwork. All you need to do is show up. Then right now, with these technology, they don't even have to show up to the closing day. You don't even have to see me. But I told them, hey, if you want, we can meet here at a title company, and they do everything for you. And then at the end, I write you a check. And
Absolutely.
for them, they seem really happy with it.
Absolutely. You told me you were, started investing at 16, 17 along with your mother. I'm curious
Right.
to hear what that experience was and if you had any hiccups along the way that you could advise people that are looking into tax liens now, because it's very prominent on social media, right? A lot of people are talking about it. A lot more people are exposed to this method of investing. I'm curious as to what, you came across in that first, maybe a couple of deals that you did and how you overcame that.
For me, the tax lien, I was fortunate where it was actually two separate houses. So then I wasn't sharing a house with anybody else. I had my own mobile home, and then the other tenant had their own mobile home. So, but obviously, when you do that, there's lots of things you have to be very handy and very selective on the tenants that you rent. You know what I mean? Because I was fortunate to where I didn't have a mortgage payment because I got the taxes through lien. So I wasn't like, oh, I have a mortgage payment, so I need someone in. I need someone in so I could afford to pay this off. So with me acquiring the property through a tax lien, there was no mortgage payment. So I could be very selective. So I could be 3, 6 months with no one there, and it didn't hurt me because I didn't have a mortgage. So the most important thing I would say is screening the tenants. Same thing in multifamily. Screening the tenants is very important because at the same time, you don't want a tenant to go in there and destroy your property because then you would have to fix it. So you, in the end, you could actually lose more money than you're making.
I think that that's the most important thing, right? You began cash flowing literally the day that you acquired it, right? There's no
Right.
mortgage or anything. You were probably cash flowing like crazy there. And I'm curious as to where all that knowledge came from, right? Was it more sort of going through the library, going through different resources? I'm curious as to what resources you use that sort of guided you along this, because I could imagine there's a little bit more to it than just that, right?
My suggestion for anyone that's getting into tax liens is to go to the tax collector website because every state is different. Every state has different guidance. Like in the state of Florida, they have both online auctions and in-person auctions. I know in Texas and Georgia, it's mainly held at the courthouse, so you actually have to go there. And a suggestion I would have is pretty much like the first time you go pretty much observe the process. Don't bid anything if you want, or and when you go there, see who's actually doing it. See if someone's willing to teach you. I was fortunate that I was at that library at the right time, and that person was actually going through the tax liens, and I had someone where, because of my relationship, I was able to ask him questions that I had, and he was nice enough to actually teach me.
And how is the relationship now with the gentleman now that you consider sort of like a mentor, or how has that relationship blossomed over the years?
So like for me, I did it just to get my volunteer hours, you know what I mean? And then after that, once I got my volunteer hours, because that was up to and I would say it's in the Wildwood, which is kind of by Ocala. But then after I got my hours and I graduated high school, I went down to Tampa to go to USF. So I didn't really stay in communication with him, but I'm very grateful for the knowledge that he gave me.
Absolutely. So some people are just there to sort of guide you along maybe one instance, right? And it's just who you run into and just the power of
Right,
that networking, right?
right,
Thank you so much for sharing that. You mentioned that there was no way that you could have gotten into real estate if it wasn't for this, right?
right.
Do this process, do this strategy. How do you suggest that other people that are just getting into the tax liens, like what do you recommend for them to get started even, right? Because maybe they don't end up going to the library, right? What are some ways that they could educate themselves on something like this besides going to the county office? Like what would you recommend?
The people that would be knowledgeable, that would know the process, would be the ones that are at the courthouse, where the tax would be. Or you can educate yourself online because they on each state, they have a breakdown of like how their process works.
Mhm.
So I would suggest going that way because there's no really other way unless it's kind of like if you want to be a professional boxer, you have to go in the ring, you have to get your hands dirty, you have to be around people that are very knowledgeable about it. If you want to be an expert, you have to be around people that are experts.
And you mentioned that your next states of interest are going to be, Texas and Georgia, right? Are there any certain areas that you're taking a look at that have piqued your interest? What are your strategies going into these other states now that you've conquered your own backyard, right?
Right. So for me, the reason I like about Texas and Georgia is in Florida, if you want to go after the tax deed, for example, using a tax certificate, you would have to wait 2 years. In Texas and Georgia, because it's a redemption state. Um, for example, in Georgia, if someone owes taxes and I win the bid on it, if the person wants to pay for it, they actually have to. There's a 20% penalty. For example, I owe $10,000 on the property, and then if I was in Florida, I would have to wait 2 years in order to apply for the tax deed and win for it. While in Georgia, if someone wanted to pay back, they have to pay back the 10,000 I paid plus 20%, and they can pay back as literally as 5 days or 10 days. They have up to 365 days. So, for example, if they owe taxes on Monday and I win the certificate for it, and then Friday they get paid, and now they can able to afford it. They have to pay back what I paid plus 20%, literally 20% in 5 days. In Texas, they actually have 180 days, and the penalty is 25%. So you can get a 25% rate of your return literally within 5 days or whenever they are able to pay it back. And most people pay it back because obviously they don't want to lose their property. The only problem about Texas and Georgia is I know in Florida they have a lot of them where you can actually bid online, but in Texas and Georgia you have to go in person.
Well, you have to be there.
You have to be in person.
Okay.
That's the only. So, like for example, where you are, if you wanted to get into Texas and Georgia, you actually have to go to Texas and Georgia. I know for Georgia, they typically host their auctions like I think the first or second Tuesday of every month. So a lot of people that are into it are actually like older gentlemen that are retired. So they don't have a job and they just go because when I went back like when I first went to my first one, which is close to 20 years, there wasn't too many people, but now everyone's heard about tax liens, so it's crowded. There's lots of competition, and I like about Florida because it's more aligned and it's my backyard, so I can drive and look at the property. If I was to do the same thing in Georgia, I would for example, have to look at the property either online or go there, and then have to go in person at the auction. But I talked to several people that actually live in other states that drive to Georgia or Texas, you know what I mean? If they live close by. Like for me, it would take like 8, 9 hours. So maybe when I like retire from my job and get more into multifamily, I will be able to actually go there. But right now, with my job, it's not feasible at the moment.
Well, in due time, I think you're doing pretty well already in Florida, just acquiring properties through that way, and you have the process down. Now it's a matter of just rinsing and repeating elsewhere.
Right.
Have you also looked into partnering with other people that are more local, or is this something that you just have to sort of manage yourself?
With managing with other people, there's a level of trust.
Mhm.
And tax lien, for the most part, it's something people can get into as a small business. It's like a small niche. When I talk to other people, most people don't do partnerships because it's such a small sum of money. While like if you go to like multifamily and use the syndication model, it's because there's a huge, large sum of money. That's why you have to work with partners and get a collective sum of money in order to purchase it. Tax liens, the entry when the amount is very limited. So I haven't spoke to anyone that has done it as a partnership. So
With syndications, as you know too, it's good to have some boots on the ground there to go and take a look at the property. But just being that you mentioned that you have to be there in person for Texas and Georgia, can be inconvenient for some, but not impossible, which is good.
right. When you go into tax liens, I would like on the website they have a list of all the properties that they have that are going to go in auction. I just wouldn't blindly go through them. Go screen them and then have an idea in your head of which properties that you want to bid at. It's very similar to go into a car auction or any type of auction. There's lots of things being sold, but then you want to know, you want to focus on the ones that you actually want to purchase. So at least have a list of properties that you know you're interested in, and then when the time comes, you can then focus in on those properties. And then also before you bid, have a have a number in place of how much you're willing to go. So I would explain, like for example, the first property I did in full circle in Florida is I bid on the property, I won. When you go to the tax certificate in Florida, it starts at 18% and it goes lower, which is different than most auctions. Most auctions, the numbers go up. In Florida, it starts at 18% and the bid goes lower. So pretty much as the bid goes lower, that means someone is buying that property and making less money. So it goes 18, 17, 16. So who's willing to pay for this property with the least amount of returns? So for me, when I got my property, the rate was really, really low, but I didn't care about the interest. You know what I mean? I wanted the property. So even if it went to like zero, I would still bid because you have to win two certificates in a row in order to apply for a tax deed. And then when you apply for the tax deed, there's an auction on that property. So if no one bids on that property or you're the highest bidder, you just got that property based on your taxes. But if someone outbids you, you would get 18% of what the bid price is. So if the bid goes up to $100,000, you just made $18,000.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, the emotion behind the bidding price, right? Like what you're able to go up to, because you mentioned that you don't care about the interest rate, dropping from 18 all the way down to zero, especially if you're already really aiming to get the property under your belt. Like what is your strategy there when thinking about what's the highest number that you're able to bid?
So for me, tax certificate auctions and tax deed auctions are totally different. So for tax certificates, the interest rate goes lower, but like you said, it depends on what your goal is. Are you there just for the interest, or are you there for the deed? That's why it's very, very critical for you to do the research on the property. Has this property been redeemed? This is a person that's always late on taxes, but they're willing to pay for it. If you're there for the interest, obviously you don't want it to go low because this individual is actually going to pay for it back. So then there's no way that you're going to get you're not there's no way you're going to get the property. So obviously for that one, if it goes to whatever you're comfortable at, because you have to wait. For example, you don't know when he's going to pay for it back. It could be a year, 2 years. So it just depends on what your goal is. So I typically I'm trying to go for the tax deed. If I see that this person is like, for example, the house isn't in a good condition, this is the first time they're not frequently on the redemption list. So there's a high probability that I could get this property. So for me, because I want to get the property, I'm willing to get it at a low rate in order to go to the tax deed process to get the property. When you go to the tax deed, it's like a normal auction. The value goes up, and the higher you go, but then at the same time, you can skip the whole tax certificate and go to the tax deed. But then when you go to the auction, you could stay there, and then if you don't win, you don't get it. You don't get in it. But if you actually went through the tax certificate, which in Florida takes 2 years to apply for a tax deed, even if you don't win, okay, you get 18% of the purchase price. And if you do win, you get the property. So it just depends on, I know like t in today's society, everybody wants to like win now. They don't want to wait 2 years or longer. They actually want a quick return, but it just depends on what you want. You know what I mean?
Thank you for touching that on your strategy, right? Because the conversation that you and I had is that you are a buy and hold investor.
Mhm.
And what do you think are the benefits of being that? And also, like you said, people that are chasing that quick return.
For me, I like the buy and hold approach because I like it's called infinite return. So pretty much like for example, if you spend like my first property, I think I spend like less than 20, you know what I mean, for it. So right now it's worth around 200, and pretty much I can rent it out, and I literally got my investment back within a couple years. Then after that, everything is pure profit. You know what I mean? No matter what the market's doing. I'm not selling it. You know what I mean? So no matter what's going on, I'm cash flowing, I'm making money. And my ultimate goal is financial freedom. So right now, most people have to work in order to generate the pay for their lifestyle. For me, I want to be able not to work and be able to live off my cash flow. So that's why as I progress through my journey, I try to acquire more and more property so then my cash flow will eventually offset my work, and then I don't have to work.
That's it.
And let's say something happens where I'm desperate for money. I can sell my property and the profits can pay for whatever happens. I can determine when I want to sell.
Slow and steady wins the race always, right?
Yep.
That's it. That's it, True. Well, I just want to say thank you so much, True, for coming on Synergy and Multifamily Growth and Mindset Talks. It was a pleasure to be able to connect with you once again. And hopefully when you're done it, when you're up here in New York again, we'll have another dinner again with the friends and family as well.
Yep. Same to you. If you're ever in Florida, just let me know.
Absolutely. I'm actually heading down there in about 2 weeks or so. So I might hit you, I might get you on that too. I'm heading
Okay.
down to Boca for about maybe a week or so.
Sounds good.
So we'll definitely connect then. But thank you so much for watching, guys, and have a good rest of your day.
Yep. Anytime.